Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking a really fascinating court case about premium tea that, well, wasn't what it seemed at all. It's a story of deception, a total legal roller coaster, and it gets to this fundamental question about what you're really paying for when you buy something premium. Okay, so let's dive right in by looking at the heart of the fraud. It all centers on this one company that built its entire reputation on a famous Taiwanese brand. But, as you'll see, its secret was hidden thousands of miles away. So this company, Fuki Tea House, ran this staggering deception for over 4 years. And just look at the math here, it's pretty wild. They were buying this lower-grade tea from Vietnam for as little as 146 new Taiwan dollars a gin. That's a traditional unit of weight, about 600 grams. Then they'd repackage it and sell it as one of Taiwan's most famous, most prestigious high mountain teas for up to $1,500. I mean, that is a massive markup built completely on a lie. And you don't even have to guess what the motive was. In his own police statement, the owner, Jan Donglong, he just lays it all out. He says, "I'll fake it," because he knew customers wouldn't buy it otherwise. He knew that made in Taiwan label, especially for high-end tea, it carries this enormous amount of trust and a huge price tag to go with it. The entire business was basically designed to betray that trust. Now, this wasn't some short-term thing. It was a systematic operation that went on for 4 years. And the only reason it started to unravel was basically a stroke of terrible luck for them. A government agriculture official made a single, totally random, routine purchase. He sent the sample off for origin testing, and that was it. That one test kicked off a whole investigation, which led to a police raid and eventually this huge court case. But, getting caught was really just the beginning of the story. The case took this absolutely dramatic turn when it went to the appeals court. The first verdict was really harsh, but the defendants, well, they managed to seriously change their fortunes the second time around. The appeals court just changed everything. I mean, look at this. The prison sentences got tweaked a little, sure, but the biggest change? That was financial. The amount of illegal profit they had to forfeit was slashed from a massive 24 million new Taiwan dollars all the way down to just 8.4 million. So, how in the world did that happen? Okay, so at first the district court came down really hard. They basically calculated the total amount of Vietnamese tea they imported, subtracted what was seized in the raid, applied a pretty standard 15% loss rate for processing, and then multiplied all of that by an average sale price. The result was this huge number, over 24 million NT dollars in illegal gains. But then, on appeal, boom, that $24 million figure just collapses to this, just over 8.4 million. And this wasn't just some rounding error. The defense came to court with some powerful new evidence that completely flipped the script on how the business actually operated. So the appeals court was convinced by two key arguments from the defense. First, they proved that a huge chunk of the imported tea, we're talking over 14,000 units, was actually sold to buyers in China. And, this is the crucial part, it was honestly labeled as Vietnamese tea. Since there was no deception there, you can't count it as fraud. And second, the court agreed to a higher processing loss rate of 20%, which cut the amount of deceptively sold tea even more. And it wasn't just about the money. The court also showed a lot of leniency to the wife, Wu Yaling. They found that her husband was really the mastermind, and she played a much smaller, more administrative role. Plus, she had a clean record, and in a real note of compassion, the court considered her role as the mean caregiver for their kids and other relatives. They decided to suspend her sentence to avoid, a devastating impact on the family. And this brings us to what I think is the most interesting part of this whole case. It's a question that went all the way up to Taiwan's Supreme Court, and it really gets to the very heart of what our food safety laws are trying to protect. So the defense's argument was pretty simple and pretty smart. They said, look, the Vietnamese tea passed all the pesticide tests. It was perfectly safe to drink. So if the product didn't actually physically harm anyone, was there really a food safety crime? It's a really compelling question, right? The Supreme Court's answer came down to this key legal idea, an abstract endangerment offense. Now that sounds complicated, but it's basically a category of crime where you don't have to prove that actual harm happened. The act itself is considered dangerous to a public interest that the law wants to protect. The best way to think about it is like this. Driving drunk is a crime, even if you don't get into an accident. You don't have to actually crash and hurt someone to be found guilty. The law punishes the risk you create just by getting behind the wheel while you're intoxicated. The Supreme Court applied that exact same logic to this tea fraud. So here it is, the heart of the ruling. The crime wasn't about whether the tea could make you sick. The crime was the deception itself. By lying about where the tea came from, the company damaged something the law considers absolutely vital: market integrity and consumer trust. And according to the court, that trust is a public good, and it's so important that it's protected by criminal law. So after all the appeals, all the legal arguments, where did the chips finally fall for this couple and their companies? Well, the Supreme Court had the final word. So in August of 2024, the Supreme Court upheld the High Court's decision, and that made it final. The husband, Yan Dong-Wang, is headed to prison for 1 year and 3 months. His wife, Wu Yaling, avoids jail time but gets a suspended sentence and a pretty big fine, and their companies have to hand over that 8.4 million plus new Taiwan dollars, the final calculated price of their deception. And this whole case just leaves us with this big, provocative thought. It really forces you to ask, what are you actually paying for when you buy a premium product? Is it just the raw materials, or is it the story, the origin, and the promise that's made on the label? In this case, the courts decided that the trust you have in that promise, well, it's worth millions. And breaking it is a crime, even if nobody gets physically hurt.